You're listening to the Play Therapy Podcast with Dr. Brenna Hicks, your source for centered and focused play therapy coaching.
Hi, I'm Dr. Brenna Hicks, the Kid Counselor. This is the Play Therapy Podcast where you get a masterclass in child-centered play therapy and practical support and application for your work with children and their families. In today's episode, I am answering an email from Kira in Texas. And her question is about kids not playing in the playroom. And her hypothesis is that it's related to excessive screen use, which obviously, you know, if you've been listening to the podcast for any length of time, that's a topic near and dear to my heart. So definitely a subject that I'd love to dive into. By the way, if you are new to the podcast, I am truly so glad you're here. Thank you for listening. Thank you for taking me with you wherever you happen to be. And you will not find a more dedicated, committed, invested group of listeners anywhere in the world. I would argue that my Play Therapy Podcast listeners are among the most committed to hone their craft of any podcast audience that is out there. So you have found your tribe. You found your people. We're so glad you're here. For those of you that have been around forever, thank you, thank you, thank you. I don't know if you all saw or heard. I know we posted it several places, but 300 and almost probably 60,000 downloads at this point of episodes. And that is that's incredible. I mean, think about the amount of time that you all have invested in doing this work. And it's mind-boggling to me, truly. I'm so grateful and I'm so humbled by it. If you're new, please enjoy this episode and then go back and start at episode 1. So sorry to, divert you a little bit, but you really need to listen to them in numerical order, chronological order. It builds and there's structure and foundation. So please go back. If you happen to be listening to this episode in the 200s, you need to start at 1 and go in order. But let's dive into Kira's question. I'm loving your podcast. It's so nice to hear you talk about all the topics, and it gives me so much insight. I studied CCPT and got my master's in Texas, studied under professors of Gary Landreth like Linda Homeyer. Kira, look at you. That is, dream scenario. I'm so happy for you. I am not back in group private practice and I am now back, I think is what she meant to say. I am now back in group private practice and I'm a huge anti-device parent, but the issue I'm seeing in my playroom is having clients come in after I introduce the room. They sit down in my one chair and they sit there and stare at me. I'm talking 7 and 8-year-old clients that do not play. I'm blown away. They just sit there and look around the room and do not engage in any play. I reflect this and wonder if their parents have told them to go in and, quote, talk to me, or if they're nervous and afraid to play in front of a stranger, etc. But my theory is that this generation is on video games too much. Yes and amen. TV streaming 24/7 or cell phones, or parents don't encourage play at home. I know a lot of mom friends who discourage play in their young kids because they want them to be mini adults and didn't want a bunch of junky toys in their house. Ugh, that hurts my heart. As a child in the 80s, I am a child of the 80s, born in 81. We had Nintendo. Oh my gosh, did I ever love Nintendo? Duck Hunt and Super Mario Brothers, amazing. We played for maybe 30 minutes, and kids shows were not on TV that often. It was either at 8 a.m. for an hour in the morning or after school for 30 minutes tops. I agree with you. That was my experience. 30 minutes on Nintendo, and you hardly ever saw kids shows. Any thoughts on what to do with children who don't play or don't know how to play? All right, Kira, thank you so much for this question. So here are my thoughts. There are all kinds of reasons why a child will come in and not play. So I think we can't lump all kids that don't play into they've had too much screen issue or category. Are many of them in that boat? Absolutely 100%. But I don't think we can universally say that every child that comes in and doesn't play, it's a screen issue. Is that a contributing factor? Likely. But we know that sometimes kids come in and they have extremely high levels of anxiety. So therefore, they are paralyzed in fear and they don't play because of anxiety. We also know that we have kids that come in with really high levels of learned helplessness. They've never been given responsibility. They've never been given the opportunity to be in charge. So they truly don't know how. And it's a learned helplessness issue. We also have kids that lack creativity and imagination. Now, is that tied to too much video game use? Most likely. But it could truly just be they're not creative, imaginative players. And if that's the case, they are drawn toward and they gravitate to more structured, safe games and play. So they will draw, they will color, they will do a board game. That is the kid that doesn't really understand what creative, imaginative play looks like. Now, eventually kids will get there, but especially early on, there can be all kinds of reasons why a child doesn't play. And you actually mentioned a couple of possibilities. Did their parents say you need to go in and talk? And then when you don't force them to talk, they are confused. Or they are afraid to play because they haven't built a relationship with you. Absolutely. The first up to 5 sessions are initiation and warm-up. So some kids are not going to be comfortable getting vulnerable and diving into their issues and their stuff when they don't really have a relationship, rapport, trust, connection yet. So sometimes we kind of have to wait for the play because they have to build that relationship first. So all kinds of considerations there. But what do we do if a child chooses not to play for any of those reasons? So is it too much screen time? Probably. Are there other factors as well? Yes. So what do? We continue to reflect their feelings. You're unsure of what you want to do. You're a little bit uncomfortable. This is new. You're not really sure. We're always going to try to get to the root emotion of what is driving the refusal to play. Now, it could be just as simple as they're unsure. Then that's the only feeling that we need to acknowledge. But if we see something more going on their face, then we could acknowledge nervous. We could acknowledge uncomfortable. We could acknowledge concerned. There's all kinds of other options, but that would come from looking into their eyes, their facial expressions, etc. But we absolutely want to validate whatever feeling we think they are expressing. We also return responsibility. So after we reflect the feeling, we just continue to say, but when you're here, you're in charge. So you get to choose what we do. And then when they sit, we're going to track behavior. You've decided that you're just going to look around for a little while longer. You're not quite sure what you're going to choose, so you're waiting before you make up your mind. So we're going to give that narrative commentary and that tracking of behavior because the goal is to normalize what's going on. This is a completely foreign concept to so many kids for a variety of reasons, right? Is it that they've never been able to just have free play and all they ever do is stare at a screen? Well, if that's the case, or if they're highly anxious, or if it's a learned helplessness issue, fill in the blank. This is a whole new, brave new world. Aldous Huxley, right? What in the world is happening? What do you mean I'm in charge for 50 minutes when I come in here? This is crazy. You're not going to tell me what to do. You're not going to ask me questions. You don't have a worksheet for me. You aren't going to tell me that I have to do X, Y, and Z. I don't like this feeling. This is uncomfortable. This is crazy. No. So all of this is going on. We're going to normalize. Sometimes when something's new, it's a little bit uncomfortable. You've never been here before, so you're not really sure. You're just looking around. You're checking things out. You haven't really decided what you are choosing yet. We want to normalize it. Sometimes when kids come in here, they don't play with anything. And then sometimes kids play with lots of things, but you're in charge, so you get to decide. We want to normalize as much as possible while reflecting feelings, while returning responsibility. Okay, and if we can, we're going to enlarge. So, and I already did some of those in those examples that I threw out, but sometimes when things are new, it can feel a little bit awkward. That's an enlargement. Because we're trying to say, I understand what's going on. And this is an expected reaction because this is new. This is different. This is a change. And then above all, we have to be patient. I have never had one child in a couple months, it's going to be 20 years. Yikes, I'm old. So in a couple months, I'm hitting the 20-year mark doing this. And when, I look back on all of the kids, I have never, absolute on purpose, have a kid that did not eventually play. No matter how long they fought it, no matter how long they resisted, no matter how lacking they were in creativity or imagination or the ability to spontaneously and freely play, not one kid refused indefinitely. Kids will always find something and they will choose to play in some way, shape, or form. Now, sometimes a kid playing is throwing a ball at one spot on the wall for 50 minutes straight. But that's that child's version of play. Sometimes it's a child vacuuming with the little Fisher-Price vacuum cleaner for 50 minutes straight. That's that child's version of play. So we can't have expectations of what playing looks like, but I've never had a kid that did not play in some capacity. So we have to be patient. It has to be their way, their time, their pace. They will eventually build up whatever they need. Do they need more imagination? Do they need more creativity? Do they need a reduction of anxiety? Do they need more opportunities to test and prove that they're capable of doing things? Whatever they need, they will build it so that they can do the work that they need to do. So it's about trusting them, trusting the process, and being patient. So Kira, thank you so much for the question, and I hope that's helpful for all of you. I feel like one of the reasons why I was actually talking about this with my staff at the center not too long ago, and I think I brought it up on one of the coaching calls, maybe one of the collective calls. I don't know, they all blend together. But at some point recently, I was talking to some group of people, and I was discussing my hypothesis that I think it actually warrants study, but that's something that I've talked about as well, but I don't really know the practicality of it. But I genuinely believe the increase in the amount of sessions that CCPT requires nationwide, I would argue it's excessive screen use. I think that is a very valid explanation for why it's taking kids longer to work through their stuff on a national average. So I think it definitely is worthy of study. I think it warrants someone looking into it and trying to pinpoint if that is one of the major catalysts for the extension of time that the average kid requires. But that's for another day. All right, Kira, thank you. For all the rest of you, thanks so much for being a part of the Kid Counselor family, the Play Therapy podcast family. Y'all mean a lot to me. Love you. Talk again soon. Bye.
Thank you for listening to the Play Therapy podcast with Dr. Brenna Hicks. For more episodes and resources, please go to www.playtherapypodcast.com.